requires.
I need to interrupt you. I know I personally voiced my opposition to CRSE originally. So I can tell you right now, I'll never vote for this if CRSE's in there. That is, to me, is not helping our teachers. It's not helping our school district, and it's pushing an agenda that I don't think we want here or in any school. So if that's in there, I can already tell you I'm not.
I can share with you, if you see the last part down here.
Yes, we're going to grade our teachers on how they indoctrinate students. It's exactly what it says if you read it. And I read it. So, like I said, again, with that in there, and I don't care if we're waiting updates. It's non-educational, and it does nothing to help the students or the teachers, because it forces them to do something they may or may not want to do.
Let's be clear. The only ones with an agenda are people like Mr. Brophy, who refuse to acknowledge that the world is a complicated place and teachers need to be aware of how to work with students from various backgrounds in order to help those students succeed. Though he claims to have read the culturally relevant and sustaining education guidelines, it's hard to believe that he could take away that they are intended to grade teachers on how well they indoctrinate students. This is a nonsense talking point. First and foremost, because they're about teacher behavior and skills and do not dictate any specific lessons, skills, or content taught to students. If any of that does affect how teachers teach, it's passing on to students how to be aware of and acknowledge the needs and backgrounds of their classmates in the community. And isn't that something we want our children to learn? Issues like this illustrate why we need educators on the board helping make these decisions. As a teacher in the classroom, I see these for what they are: ways to improve students' education by being aware of things that can get in the way of the best possible education we can give them. So let's take a look at what they actually say. We all bring different perspectives to the classroom, and all perspectives come with blind spots and assumptions. That doesn't make anyone a bad person, but like when you're driving, you need to know where your blind spots are. This is simply the next step in recognizing blind spots. Once you know what they are, you need to do something about them. Just like when we're driving, if you don't check your blind spot, you can never fully see what needs to be seen, and the results could be disastrous. In a car, we adjust our mirrors and check our blind spots. In education, we learn and grow to make sure we're not missing them. One of the most important things we do as educators is connect learning to real-world experiences. And in order to do that, we need to be aware of what real-world experiences our students bring to the classroom. Teachers cannot teach most effectively if they're not connecting to what students already know and have learned and seen in their real life. This is just basic good teaching. Any teacher will tell you that different students learn differently, and any teacher will tell you that there's no one-size-fits-all way to teach a lesson. All this is doing is putting words to what great teachers have done forever and are still doing now, meeting children where they are and trying to give them what they need to reach success. Different perspectives and experiences in a classroom or a school or a community or a company when they're out there working in life as adults, there is strength and we should view them as one. We are not all the same, and that's a good thing. The best ideas come from good faith discussions where people share different ideas and perspectives and then can integrate them into a larger, more comprehensive understanding of the issue. I combine these because they go together and they pretty much speak for themselves. Parent involvement is integral to student success. Making sure we're aware that just like different students need different things to learn, different parents and families are going to need different ways and methods of communication in order to be engaged in their children's learning. This is so important. Every student should be expected to be able to meet the bar we set, and we should treat them that way. This actually circles back to that very first competency. We need to recognize unconscious biases that might mean treating some students as less capable so that we're not projecting that to them and making them believe that we think that they're less capable. But the key to that is the unconscious part. They're not doing it on purpose or out of malice or prejudice. There's no shame in recognizing that we have unconscious biases. There is, though, in thinking that we're immune to them and failing to identify and address them when it could damage students' education. This is the last one, and I actually want to tell a story because this hits me a little bit personally. So to illustrate this idea, a few days ago, I was reading an article in a teacher publication that talked about the effects of how we deal with students with hard to pronounce names. And as someone who's had a lifetime of people mispronouncing my own last name, it really spoke to me. Names carry history, culture, heritage, family pride, and everyone with a difficult or tricky to say or spell name knows the feeling of someone botching it. Almost everyone is willing to give people a pass the first time around though. But what about the second time? The third? What about that happening multiple times per class period, every day, 8 periods a day? That is what a microaggression is. I've never gotten mad or bitter or offended by someone mispronouncing Piccioni. It's not an easy or necessarily intuitive name to pronounce. The way I always put it on the board phonetically for students, the first time they miss it, it's like when you get a flu shot. It's a tiny little prick that you barely notice, and even if it hurts a little bit, you're used to it and you've experienced much worse. But what if you have to get a bunch of them all the time, over and over, and any one is not a big deal, but the accumulated mass of them would cause a problem? It would actually be painful. It would actually interfere with your ability to function at your best. The negative effects of microaggressions is a death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's the straw that broke the camel's back. It's not the first or second or even the 100th time. It's the 1,000th. It's the innumerable and seemingly unending line of them that does damage. I've included a link to the Culturally Relevant and Sustaining Education Program Framework Guidelines, or CRSE, that give a more in-depth look at them and break these competencies down into the specific standards under each that teachers should be trying to meet. Like so much of the scaremongering about education these days, these competencies and standards that go along with them are just best practices that good teachers have already been doing for decades. So I'm hard pressed to find a good faith reason why Mr. Brophy and others would object to good teaching practices or vote against them being in a document where they need to be included by law.